Sudan, a land of ancient civilizations, fertile Nile valleys, and endless desert, to the world. Its story has often been one of war, famine, and political crises. But beneath its soil lies a hidden fortune: gold, uranium, chromium, and rare earth minerals worth billions. These resources have become the silent engine of power struggles, foreign interference, and conflict. Today, we uncover the truth that the headlines never tell.
Sudan's history is a tapestry woven with cultural richness, strategic geography, and deep political complexity. Positioned in Northeast Africa, bordering Egypt, Ethiopia, South Sudan, and the Red Sea coast, Sudan once ranked as Africa's largest country before the independence of South Sudan in 2011. Its population is ethnically and linguistically diverse, home to Arab and African communities, nomadic herders, riverine farmers, and urban dwellers. Yet, despite its human and environmental wealth, Sudan's modern narrative has been dominated by persistent conflict and political instability. From the 1956 independence from Anglo-Egyptian rule to the decades that followed, Sudan's governance was shaped by coups, military interventions, and civil wars. The longest and deadliest of these civil wars, between the North and South, devastated millions of lives until South Sudan's system. But even partition could not bring lasting peace. Internally, Sudan has been rocked by ideological battles between Islamist factions, military juntas, democratic movements, and regional insurgencies. Cities like Khartoum became battlegrounds for control, while rural regions experienced marginalization and neglect. Yet the Sudanese political crisis cannot be understood solely through a political lens. It must be seen through the prism of economic opportunity and resource competition. Unlike many African nations whose conflicts are directly tied to oil or diamonds, Sudan's story is defined by minerals that are less visible but equally powerful. Unlike oil, which can be transported through pipelines and tracked in export logs, minerals like gold, uranium, and various strategic ores can be easily smuggled, traded through opaque networks, and exploited without public scrutiny. In global markets, gold is more liquid than many currencies, and political actors know this. For Sudan, a country repeatedly squeezed by sanctions and economic isolation, gold became not just a commodity but a lifeline, both for survival and for clandestine power struggles. When official institutions faltered, informal networks emerged. Mining warlords, military commanders with unauthorized gold convoys, and foreign actors willing to trade equipment and cash for unregulated access. Adding another layer to the puzzle is Sudan's position as a strategic geopolitical link. Its Red Sea coastline links Africa to the Middle East, and its proximity to oil-producing states makes it a region of interest for global powers beyond resources alone. Some analysts describe Sudan as a chessboard, where regional rivalries between Gulf states, Egypt, Ethiopia, and even global powers play out indirectly, using proxies and influence operations. Yet for ordinary Sudanese, these grand narratives have very real consequences. Economic hardship, corruption that drains national budgets, environmental degradation near mining sites, and communities displaced not only by war, but by exploitation of their lands. In this chapter, then, Sudan emerges not merely as a failing state or a region of perpetual crises, but as a nation rich in natural and human potential, tragically caught between promise and peril. To understand modern Sudan, one must trace the tangled roots of its political instability. Sudan's post-independence era began with optimism, but was soon undermined by internal divisions that no single government could reconcile. Early leaders struggled to bridge the divide between the largely Arabized north and the predominantly African south. Ethnic, religious, and economic cleavages deepened, fueled by unequal access to resources and influence. The first military coup in 1958 set a pattern that would repeat for decades. Civilian governments were short-lived, constantly supplanted by military leadership that promised stability but delivered authoritarian rule. Perhaps the most consequential era came in 1989 with the rise of Omar al-Bashir, whose regime lasted for 3 decades, until 2019. Bashir's rule was marked by internal repression, the imposition of strict Islamic law, and brutal campaigns in regions like Darfur, where accusations of genocide and crimes against humanity drew international condemnation. Under Bashir, Sudan's political institutions weakened, parliament became a rubber stamp, the judiciary lost independence, and opposition groups were suppressed. Militarization of governance became entrenched, creating a system where power was maintained through alliances with military elites rather than democratic legitimacy. When protests erupted in 2018 over economic hardship, the government's violent response catalyzed widespread civil unrest, eventually leading to Bashir's removal. However, the removal of an autocrat did not immediately translate into lasting peace or democratic governance. Transitional authorities, a mix of military and civilian representatives, tried to navigate a path forward, but disagreements over power sharing, economic reform, and accountability for past abuses fractured the coalition. The result was a fragile balance, prone to collapse. Meanwhile, armed groups in regions like Darfur, Blue Nile, and the Nuba Mountains continued to assert themselves, not only for political recognition but also for economic control, especially in territories rich with minerals. These groups often acted outside central authority, forging their own alliances and revenue streams. Some negotiated peace agreements, others returned to conflict when agreements failed to deliver tangible benefits. A critical but less discussed dimension of this instability is the economic vacuum created by mismanagement and sanctions. When Sudan was isolated from global financial systems, particularly during the height of U.S. sanctions, the state's ability to generate official revenue diminished. The government turned increasingly toward informal sectors: currency, black markets, unregulated gold mining, and barter-style trade with foreign entities. These sectors, in turn, empowered non-state actors, warlords, regional commanders, and smuggling networks, who could leverage these revenue streams to build personal militias. The pattern is clear. Political instability in Sudan is not just the result of ideological disagreement or cultural fragmentation. It is deeply connected to economic desperation and competition over control of unregulated wealth. When official institutions fail to provide equitable economic opportunities, alternative systems arise. These systems may be profitable for a few, but they fuel corruption, erode national cohesion, and perpetuate conflict. In sum, Sudan's political instability is not random. It is structurally tied to weak governance, economic mismanagement, and competing interests over the country's untapped mineral wealth. Understanding this connection is key to grasping how ordinary grievances become entrenched conflicts and why peace remains elusive. In Sudan's economy, gold is not just a mineral, it is the heart of a parallel financial universe, long overshadowed by oil and global discussions about African resources. Gold quietly became Sudan's most lucrative export in the 21st century. When South Sudan seceded in 2011, Sudan lost oil revenue that once accounted for significant national income. The government and informal sectors sought alternatives. Gold emerged as the most viable. Sudan's gold is found primarily in the eastern regions, areas like the Nuba Mountains, Red Sea Hills, and other hard-to-access territories. These regions were historically marginalized, receiving little development investment from Khartoum, but suddenly became economically strategic due to gold deposits. Local communities, who once relied on subsistence agriculture and pastoralism, found themselves living atop a wealth that outsiders coveted legally. The Sudanese government attempted to regulate gold mining through state-owned companies and license concessions, yet in practice, vast quantities of gold were mined informally, outside official frameworks. Small-scale miners, often called artisanal miners, dug deep pits with rudimentary tools, selling their finds through informal traders who bypassed banking systems entirely. This informal economy ballooned because government controls were weak and enforcement uneven. Compounding the problem, international sanctions during the Bashir era pushed Sudanese trade underground. With little access to global banking, gold became a preferred medium for international exchange. Traders from neighboring countries and further abroad arrived in Sudan offering cash and goods in return for gold. These transactions often occurred outside legal channels, creating a network of gold smuggling routes that fed both regional and global markets. The true scale of gold production in Sudan is difficult to measure precisely because so much of it flows through unrecorded transactions. Official figures are only a fraction of actual output. Independent resources estimate that tens of tons of gold leave the country every year unreported, representing billions of dollars in value. This leakage deprives the national treasury of revenue that could fund schools, hospitals, and infrastructure. But the consequences extend beyond economics. The gold rush attracted power brokers, military leaders, local strongmen, and foreign interests who sought to control mining areas by force or influence. In some cases, military units took direct control of mines, using soldiers and allied militias to secure territory. In others, private guards protected mining concessions, often clashing with local communities over land and water rights. Local communities themselves became caught in a dangerous paradox. While gold promised wealth, it also brought environmental destruction. Mining pits scarred the landscape. Water sources became polluted with mercury and other chemicals used in processing, or traditional livelihoods suffered, forcing more people into mining, a cycle that deepened dependency on the informal gold economy. Foreign influence also grew alongside this boom. Traders and investors from China, Turkey, the Gulf states, and neighboring African countries entered Sudan with equipment, cash, and promises of partnership. While some investments brought jobs and technology, others exploited regulatory gaps, paying minimal taxes and operating with opaque ownership structures. Sudanese policymakers face a stark choice. Without reforms to formalize the gold sector, strengthen regulation, and ensure transparent revenue management, gold will continue to fuel corruption and conflict. But properly harnessed, gold could become a foundation for economic recovery, offering Sudan a path out of decades of instability. Sudan is not only rich in gold. Beneath its deserts lie deposits of minerals that are crucial to modern industries and national security. Among these, uranium, chromium, tantalum, and rare earth elements stand out for their strategic value. Yet unlike gold, these minerals are less visible in everyday commerce. They are sold to high-tech, aerospace, nuclear, and military markets, often through confidential arrangements that rarely make headlines. Uranium, in particular, exemplifies this hidden dimension. As a key fuel for nuclear energy and weapons programs, uranium has geopolitical significance far beyond Sudan's borders. During the Bashir era, Sudan explored uranium extraction largely with foreign partners, including companies and state-linked entities from Asia and the Middle East. While some of this cooperation was public, much of it occurred through confidential investment agreements designed to protect proprietary interests. Chromium, another valuable mineral, is essential for producing stainless steel and high-performance alloys. Sudan's chromium deposits, found in mountainous regions of the east and northeast, attracted mining companies seeking to diversify supply chains outside the traditional producers in southern Africa. Like uranium-chromium transactions were often conducted with limited transparency, governed by bilateral deals rather than open public bidding. Tantalum and rare earth elements further expand Sudan's strategic importance. Tantalum is used in electronics, medical devices, and aerospace components, while rare earth elements are indispensable to technologies like electric vehicles, renewable energy systems, and advanced optics. Demand for these minerals has surged globally, yet supply is dominated by a few countries. Sudan's deposits offer alternative sources, a fact that has not escaped the attention of multinational corporations and national governments. The extraction of these minerals poses both opportunities and risks. On the positive side, if managed responsibly, revenues from uranium and strategic minerals could finance infrastructure, education, and healthcare. They could attract foreign investment, encourage technology transfer, and integrate Sudan into global supply chains for the first time. However, strategic value also attracts strategic competition. Countries with nuclear energy ambitions, or those seeking supply chain security for critical industries, have shown interest in accessing Sudan's resources. But this interest is not always altruistic. Foreign governments often use economic leverage loans, military aid, trade agreements to gain preferential access to mineral contracts. In some cases, political concessions are linked to mining rights, support in international forums, favorable diplomatic recognition, or military cooperation. This dynamic creates a paradox. While Sudan's minerals are national assets, the terms of access and extraction are often negotiated far from public view, in closed rooms between elites and foreign investors. Civil society, local communities, and even parliamentarians may be unaware of the scale or implications of these agreements. Local populations especially in mining regions, experience direct impacts long before national policymakers do. Mining operations disrupt land use, alter water systems, and change social dynamics. Regions rich in strategic minerals are often remote, with limited infrastructure. As companies build roads and facilities, local expectations rise. But so do tensions over jobs, compensation, and environmental protection. The lack of transparent governance in the mining sector also invites corruption. Officials with regulatory authority can be bribed. Contracts can be awarded without competitive bidding. Revenues can be diverted into private accounts. In Sudan's fragile political environment, where institutions are weak and public oversight limited, these risks are magnified. The global demand for strategic minerals is unlikely to diminish. Sudan's position as a potential supplier puts it at the center of an emerging geopolitical race, one that could bring development or deepen dependency and conflict. The outcome depends on Sudan's ability to build transparent, accountable systems that ensure minerals benefit the nation as a whole, not just select elites. Sudan's resources have shaped not only its economy but also its international relationships. Foreign influence in Sudan is not a new phenomenon. It dates back to colonial times. But in the modern era, it has taken on complex economic and geopolitical dimensions. During Bashir's rule, Sudan became a focal point for regional and global powers seeking strategic partnerships. China emerged as one of the most prominent external actors, drawn by Sudan's oil before 2011 and later by its mineral wealth. Chinese companies provided infrastructure loans, built roads and factories, and signed mining agreements that often included confidential revenue-sharing terms. In return, Sudan provided mineral exports and political support in international forums. Russia, too, showed interest in Sudan's resources and strategic position. Russian companies explored mining projects, while political alliances offered military cooperation and diplomatic backing. For Russia, Sudan represented not just a resource partner, but a foothold in Africa, a region increasingly contested by other global powers. Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar competed for influence through investment in agriculture, ports, and mining. These states often linked economic aid to political alignment, shaping Sudan's foreign policy decisions on issues ranging from Yemen to relations with Egypt and Ethiopia. Western powers also played a role, though their influence was more constrained by sanctions and human rights pressures. The United States imposed sanctions on Sudan for decades, citing human rights abuses and terrorism concerns. While these sanctions were intended to pressure political reform, they also pushed Sudan's economy further underground, intensifying reliance on informal sectors like gold smuggling and enabling foreign actors to negotiate outside international regulatory frameworks. The cumulative effect of these external engagements is a Sudan deeply embedded in global rivalries, where foreign interests often overshadow national priorities. Mineral contracts become tools of diplomacy, traded for military aid, political support, or economic concessions that have little transparency or public accountability. These deals are frequently negotiated behind closed doors, with limited parliamentary oversight, creating fertile ground for corruption and elite enrichment. Foreign influence can exacerbate conflict dynamics. In regions rich with minerals, external partners may align with local factions that promise access and control. Armed groups, in turn, use mining revenues to sustain operations, purchase weapons, and strengthen territorial control. This cycle perpetuates instability, making peaceful resolution more difficult. Local communities often bear the brunt. They see foreign companies arrive with promises of jobs and development, but they also witness land dispossession, environmental harm, and exclusion from When benefits do trickle down, they are frequently unevenly distributed, fueling grievances that can escalate into localized conflicts. International institutions and NGOs have attempted to promote transparency through initiatives like the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, which encourages public disclosure of mining contracts and revenues. However, participation is voluntary, and enforcement mechanisms are weak, especially in countries with fragile governance structures. For Sudan, achieving greater transparency is a complex challenge. It requires not only legal reforms but also political will, something difficult to find when political elites benefit from maintaining opaque systems. Civil society groups and independent media play crucial roles, pushing for accountability and public access to information. Yet their efforts are often constrained by political suppression and limited resources. In this chapter, Sudan emerges not as a passive victim of external forces, but as an arena of strategic competition, where foreign influence intersects with local ambitions, power struggles, and economic desperation. Understanding these hidden agendas is essential to grasping why peace has been so elusive and why resource wealth remains more a curse than a blessing. At the heart of Sudan's mineral story, gold, uranium, rare earths, chromium, lies the most important and often overlooked element. Its people. While politicians debate revenue sharing and foreign investors negotiate deals, ordinary Sudanese face daily struggles that are inseparable from the country's resource dynamics. In mining regions, the human cost is visible. Villages near goldfields often suffer environmental degradation. Water sources become contaminated with chemicals used in our processing. Farmlands, once fertile, turn barren. Respiratory illnesses and skin conditions increase. Families displaced from ancestral lands find themselves without compensation or alternative livelihoods. The promise of economic opportunity becomes a double-edged sword. Conflict compounds these hardships. In regions where armed groups operate, civilians are caught between competing forces. Recruitment of child soldiers, forced labor near mining sites, and gender-based violence rise in areas where governance is weak and economic desperation is high. Schools close, health clinics struggle, and community cohesion frays. The economic picture is equally troubling. Despite billions in informal gold exports and strategic mineral potential, Sudan remains one of the world's poorest nations. Hyperinflation, unemployment, and currency instability ravage household incomes. National infrastructure, roads, hospitals, utilities, suffers from chronic underinvestment. When mineral wealth flows through unofficial channels or into elite bank accounts abroad, the broader population sees few tangible benefits. Yet amidst these challenges, there are reasons for cautious optimism. Sudanese civil society has grown more active and resilient, advocating for transparency, environmental protection, and community rights. Organizations document mining contracts, educate citizens on revenue management, and demand accountability from leaders. Independent journalists expose corruption, even at great personal risk. International partners, too, can play constructive roles, not by imposing solutions, but by supporting Sudan's capacity to manage resources responsibly. Technical assistance in geological surveys, environmental safeguards, contract monitoring, and legal frameworks can empower national and local authorities. Participation in initiatives that require public disclosure of contracts and revenues can reduce corruption and build public trust. Grassroots solutions also matter. Community-led cooperatives that manage small-scale mining, with proper safety and environmental standards, offer models that balance economic opportunity with social responsibility. Investments in value-added processing, so minerals are refined within Sudan rather than exported as raw, or could create jobs and retain more wealth locally. Education is another key. Training programs in geology, mining, engineering, environmental science, and finance can help build a skilled workforce that Sudan can leverage for development. Scholarships, partnerships with universities abroad, and public-private training initiatives can cultivate the next generation of professionals who understand both the technical and ethical dimensions of resource management. Finally, political reform must address the root causes of instability, establishing democratic institutions with real representation, strengthening the rule of law, and ensuring civil liberties create a foundation on which economic reforms can succeed. Resource wealth should be managed through transparent systems that involve citizens, including those from rural and marginalized communities. And Sudan stands at a crossroads. Its mineral wealth can either fuel further conflict, corruption, and inequality, or become a catalyst for inclusive development and long-term stability. The difference lies not in the resources themselves, but in how they are governed.